Barry Neal again here, and in this video I want to cover a really important topic, and that is why people do what they do. What motivates people to do what they do? And this comes up in the field of therapy, and a lot of times people look at things like primary gains and secondary gains, and there's a lot of stuff in the therapy field talking about secondary gains. Well, personally, I used to believe in secondary gains. I no longer do. To me, it's much more empowering, much easier to think of the primary gain. What is the real primary gain? Because when you get that, this idea of secondary gains just goes out the window. So let's have a look at this. So basically, a client comes in, and typically they're doing a certain behaviour. Yeah. And they're doing a certain behaviour, and if you ask them why they're doing that, typically there is some sort of surface outcome. Okay, so for example, I'm assuming you watch this because you want to become a better therapist, so you're doing the behaviours, i.e. studying, reading books, watching videos, going to courses and things like that. You're doing the behaviours, all those behaviours, so that you can become a better therapist. So the surface outcome is to be, say for example, the best therapist. Let's make it a grandiose one. In the world. So you want to be the best therapist in the world. Sounds like a good idea. Okay. Now, in order to do that, in order to behave in that certain way, you really have to be in a certain emotional state. Because haven't there been times where you really want to do something, you know you should do things, but for whatever reason you don't know. You know you should behave in a certain way, you know you need to go and study, you know you need to do these things, but you're not in the emotional state that you need to be in. And this goes for our clients as well. This happens all the way through. So I'm using this example here of the best therapist in the world, but this applies to every single problem that a client comes into your therapy centre or online now with. So there's some behaviour that they're either doing or some behaviour that they want to do, and there's some emotional state that they get in. Now that emotional state may either enhance the behaviours or it may do the opposite. Because obviously if you are in a better state, you are far more likely to do the behaviours that you want to do in order to get your outcome. Does that make sense? So the emotional state is really important if you want to change behaviours. If you're trying to just change behavioural levels, at the behavioural level, you can have short-term change. What you really need is to change the emotional state. If you get someone in a totally different emotional state, and that emotional state gets triggered whenever they go into that context, then you're going to get far better change by working at that level than that level. Does that make sense? Okay, so then the question begs the question, well, how do you get in a better emotional state when you don't feel good? Well, emotional states are really just made up of three things. We like to overcomplicate it in the field of psychology, but really it's just three things. It's your physiology, stroke focus, it's a combination of your language, the language you use, the phrases you use, the limiting phrases you use, the metaphors that you may use to describe your problem, and your beliefs. And as a therapist, we really want to if we're working with someone, we really want to make a change at all three levels. So many hypnotherapists, quite often they will work at the belief level, but they won't work at the language level or the physiology level. Some others will work on the language, but they still won't work with the physiology and the focus. Very, very few talk therapists or hypnotherapists or even NLPers ever work at the physiological level. And yet we know there are so many studies now about treating depression and anxiety through exercise. that it's as effective, if not more effective, than using antidepressants. And yet, there we are, sit down in the chair, have a relax. We never even talk about the physiology. So we really need to be looking at those three things if we're going to create long-term change. But then, let's go all the way back up here. There's this surface outcome, want to be the best therapist in the world. Why? What is that going to do? Well, it serves a human need. And this is the level we need to be thinking about. When we look at any behaviour that either we do or a client does, we need to be thinking, what behaviour is this need mouth doesn't work today. What behaviour is this need serving? That's what we need to be looking at, is what is the need, the underlying human need that this behaviour is serving. Because when we look at behaviours, we want to start to understand that a behaviour is nothing more than a vehicle to help us achieve this human need. That's it. And so when you come to do behavioural change, you need to understand then that if this is what they really want, there are many, many ways of getting there if this behaviour is a problem. So the behaviour that they're coming in with, the problem behaviour, is just a vehicle to get the need. They don't want the behaviour. They want the need. And the behaviour is merely a vehicle for achieving the need. So what are these needs? Well, there's a number of different models on this. The obvious one is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. To me, it's overcomplicated. I like to have something in my mind. I don't want to refer to notes. I just have something I can have in my mind that when I hear someone speak, hear them describe a situation, I can go, right, that's meeting that need, or that need. And this work comes from all people, from Tony Robbins. Now, whatever you think about him, he has been around for a long while. He is extremely knowledgeable in this area, and he has tons of experience, probably more than most of us put together, because he's worked with millions upon millions of people over the years. So he has come up with this thing which he calls 6 human needs. And the first need is certainty. This is what we primarily need, that we all must have right now. Like, for example, right now, if the whole room was shaking where you are or where I am, we're in the middle of an earthquake and the ceiling was collapsing, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We would all be running for the hills because we haven't got that certainty. So certainty is the number one need that we have. And you'll notice that when you're working with people, that so many of their behaviours are an attempt to get certainty. This is particularly true when you're working with clients who are anxious. People who are anxious, one of the reasons why they're anxious is because they can't deal with the uncertainty of life. And so they set up all these different rituals, like people with OCD, they set up certain rituals to try and create certainty. So, as God has a sense of humour, the second human need is uncertainty. Now this is really, it sounds like a bit of a paradox that we have the need for certainty, but we also have a need for uncertainty. Well, it's the uncertainty that provides all the excitement in your life. Think about it. If you were in a relationship right now and you were certain in every situation how your partner was going to respond, you knew that whenever X happened, he's going to respond, or he or she was going to respond in a certain way, every single day, the same way, life is going to get boring really quickly. And so is your relationship. So as much as we'd like certainty, it is boring. So we need uncertainty in our life. So uncertainty provides all the juice, the excitement of life. You know, the people who do skydiving and things like that, they have a real strong need for uncertainty. They're embracing uncertainty. So anything you do that excites you has a degree of uncertainty in it. So the number 2 need is uncertainty. The next need is for love, stroke connection. Now this can be with other people, it could be with your dog, It could be with anything, but we have this need for connection with either other people or other things. Really, really primary need that we all have. And you'll see so many people's behaviours are because they want to connect with other people. They want the love, they want the connection, and it's probably something they've never had. The fourth need, again, which seems a little bit in conflict with the previous one, is significance. I can't spell, save my life. This is really important. Significance, you'll see this come up so often in the problems that we have. Significance is really important, and when you see someone's behaviour striving for significance, you can bet your life it's because they don't feel it. So let's go back to this example here. So the person who wants to be the best therapist in the world. Now that sounds like a real positive thing, doesn't it? But if their human need is they want to be the best therapist in the world because they want to feel significant, can you see how that could be a bit of a problem? They are wanting to be the best therapist in the world because they want to feel significant, which implies right now they don't feel significant enough. But what if the need was different? What if the need was that they wanted the connection with other people? They wanted the love and connection with other people. Can you see how that would take it in a totally different direction? Now you can get significance in many different ways. Wrong one. A little while ago I watched a programme on British TV with a Turner Prize winning potter called Grayson Perry. You may have heard of him. He's a transvestite potter, and he's a great character, and he lives not far from me. And he did this programme about what makes men men, because he was doing this big pottery thing, emblazoned with all different characters of men in Britain. And he went to a northern working men's, northern mixed martial arts club. And there was all these young men in there who are beating the hell out of each other. They're all going in these competitions, punching and biting, kicking the hell out of each other. And he's looking at that, wondering, why would people do this? It's just like, why would they do that? So he then sat each one down individually and started talking to them. And virtually every single one came up with the same story, that no one had ever told them that they were good enough. No one had ever told them that they were significant. They may not have had a father figure or a mother figure, whatever, but no one had ever told them they were significant. And the only way they knew how to become significant was to get in that ring and beat the other person. So you can become really significant by being the best at something or by being the worst at something. If you get a young kid in the inner cities who's again never been told he's good enough, he then goes and joins a gang, and someone gives him a gun and says, right, this is your initiation, and he walks up to some stranger, points the gun at him. At that moment, he's now significant, probably more significant than he's ever been in his life. And he's definitely significant to the person who's pointed the gun at. So you can become significant by building the biggest house or the biggest tower block in town, or you can be significant by knocking down the biggest tower block in town. And we often see this in the therapy world. There's a lot of backbiting in the therapy world, and someone does something really successful and everyone else wants to knock them down. An example of this is snobbery around people like Tony Robbins. He's done extremely well. He's probably helped more people around the world than most. He's introduced more people to things like NLP and hypnosis than probably anyone else in the world. And then you get some snobby people saying, Tony Robbins. Again, they're fueling their significance. So significance is really, really important. So these are the four main conscious ones. And then at the fifth level, we have growth. There's the old phrase, you're either growing or you're dying. And this is particularly true with human behaviour. And a lot of times when people get stuck, it's because they're not growing. And this is when depression and things like that can get in. So it's really important to be aware of this. And if you want to help people change, you need to encourage them to grow as a human being. And this last one is really, really important when it comes to breaking people out of their problems and out of their ruts. And this is particularly true right now. At the time of filming this, we're right in the height of the coronavirus pandemic. And at the moment, a little while ago, the British government called for volunteers to help the National Health Service. So you've got a lot of people who are frightened and anxious. They're not able to work because of the lockdown. But about 500,000 people suddenly volunteered so they could contribute to others. So if you're working with people, this is one of the things you want to be bearing in mind, is because if you want them to change, one of the best things that they can do to help break out of a rut is to contribute to other people. You often see this in times of tragedy. An example would be out in America, there's a charity called Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. This was formed by a group of mothers who'd lost their children to drunk drivers. Now they could have sat there holding their heads moaning, why did this happen to me? What has happened to my son? But they didn't. They said, right, we've got to do something about this. We've got to make sure this never happens again. So we're going to form a charity to publicise the dangers of drunk driving, to contribute to others. And you'll see this on the news. You'll see someone who's experienced something absolutely awful, but they've turned that into a positive. And it absolutely transforms them. So this is what's going on. So this is what we need to be thinking of. And so when people say, oh, it's a secondary gain, or it's a, there's another reason why they're doing this particular problem, example like smoking or something like that. It's not a secondary gain, it's a primary gain. That's what you want to look at. Now, the confusion is, it's not just one. Quite often, a behaviour will fulfill many of these. In some cases, all of them. If you're in a relationship and you've got the best relationship in the world, your relationship will fulfill all of these at a high level. So how we work it out is we'll ask the person, so on a scale of 0 to 10, how much certainty does this behaviour give you? On a scale of 0 to 10, how much love and connection do you get out of this? So for example, with the smoking, you could ask the person, okay, so then they'll tell you, I smoke to relax. Well, how certain are you that smoking helps you relax? Well, blah, blah, it's like an 8 out of 10. And you go, okay, how much uncertainty does it provide you? Probably not a lot. It could do is they might say, well, it breaks up my day. I get really stressed sitting in my office, and it breaks up my day. So I go outside and have a cigarette, and it is so again you've got the breaking up of the monotony. Love and connection. You might think, how the hell has smoking got to do with love and connection? Well, for many, it's one of the reasons why they started smoking in the first place, because of peer pressure. And particularly now, because smoking is not allowed in office places or workplaces, many people take that break, go outside and stand there and have a chat for 5-10 minutes while they're having a cigarette. So there is connection with it. So it's not secondary gain. It's not like, oh, yeah, the secondary gain for smoking is because I can go outside and chat with my friends and relax a little bit. No, it's not a secondary gain. It's a primary gain. And so what happens is, if you get a particular behaviour fulfills 3 of these needs at a level of 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10, what you're basically dealing with then is an addiction. And so what you need to do is not just stop the old behaviour, because if you do that, you've left all these needs unfulfilled, unmet. So what you need to do is to find out what is a replacement behaviour, what can you put in its place that will fulfill those needs at a much higher level consistently that is positive. And this is why one of the reasons why I get probably better long-term change than most is that I'm not just looking to change the behaviour. It's irrelevant. The behaviour is irrelevant. The behaviour is just a vehicle to fulfill the needs. So what you need to do then is just find another behaviour that fulfills those needs in a much better way and condition it in, and that way the new behaviour sticks. So don't think in the terms of secondary gains. It's nonsense. It's a primary gain. And the primary gain is these needs. So I hope this gives you some ideas. I mean, this is a big topic, and normally I'd spend a couple of days on this in the seminar. We work out and we look at people's needs and what ways they're being met, what ways they're not being met. But the basic thing is, if you're looking for significance in your life, it means you haven't got it. If you're looking for love and connection right now, it means you haven't got it. So the behaviours are trying to achieve those needs in a certain way. So I hope this gives you some ideas. If you have any questions, once again, let me know. Either contact me via YouTube or off my website, on Facebook, and hopefully we'll be in touch soon. See you later.